Well, this is a special edition called Daystar Sports, and our guest today is Ted Dibiase. Many of you will know him from the world of professional wrestling, where he portrayed the character of the $1 Million Man. And I'm not ashamed to say that since a little boy, I have been a professional wrestling fan myself. Not so much in the last few years, but especially when I was younger. But Ted, God has done great things in his life, and we'll let him tell that part of the story. But join me as we welcome Ted Dibiase. Ted, it's so great to have you.
Good to be here with you.
Of course, a lot of people don't know that your whole life and background has been involved in wrestling. Your stepfather, Iron Mike Dibiase, was a professional wrestler, and when you were a teenager, there was a tragedy that involved him. Tell us about that.
We had, back then wrestling was very regional. There were regional promotions all over the country, and so growing up in the wrestling world and as the son of a wrestler, you moved around a lot. I went to a lot of different schools. We had just moved back to Texas from our family home, which is Omaha, Nebraska, and my dad was wrestling out of Amarillo, and on a hot July night, July the 2nd, 1969, he suffered a heart attack in the ring during a match, and died. And that day flipped my whole world upside down.
That's pretty tough to recover from, isn't it, as a son?
Yeah, especially, I had a special relationship with my dad. Here's a man who took me under his wing and accepted me as a son when he married my mother, and I was grateful. Not only was I grateful, but I admired him in such a way that I looked at Mike Dibiase. I mean, he was a wonderful dad, but he was a tremendous athlete. National amateur wrestling champion out of Nebraska, has been touted as one of the 4 greatest athletes in the history of the school.
Wow.
But he was so bigger than life to me. But I wanted to be just like him, and he was my hero as a kid growing up. And so when he died, a part of me died, and we moved to a small town in southern Arizona where my grandparents, my mother's parents lived, a little place called Wilcox. There's 3 traffic lights in Wilcox.
So big city.
Big city. And there I was with my big dreams of college and professional football and wrestling, and my mother sinks into alcoholism overnight. And
because no doubt his death affected her too.
Oh, tremendously.
So kind of a crossroads time of your life. But you went on and you played football at West Texas State University. Then you decided to follow in your father's footsteps. Why did you make that decision? Why didn't you stick with football?
It was always a toss-up for me. I loved both. What I found in college football was that I realized that I was good enough to play on the college level, but I knew I wasn't going to the pros. And when I knew I wasn't going to the pros, my attention then turned to wrestling. Actually, I started refereeing during the summers for the local wrestling promotion out of Amarillo. And by getting in the ring and being a part of it and learning the psychology of pro wrestling, that's where my heart started going anyway. And so after my junior year, after I completed my junior year of college, I went to Louisiana, which was then called Mid-South Wrestling, which was all of Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi. And I was going to try it on for the summer. I was going to get my feet wet, see if I really wanted to be a wrestler.
So you were in that for several years, and then finally you were discovered by what is now known as the WWE, the World Wrestling Entertainment. Mm-hmm. How did they discover you?
I had gone to New York the first time in 1979, and I wrestled there for about a year. And at that time, Vince McMahon Sr. was the owner-operator, and his son, who now is taking it to the height it is today, was an announcer. So they knew me from that brief time that I spent there then. I then went on back to Mid-South, and that's when my personal career started to bloom, and I became very well known within the wrestling circles as a great heel, bad guy.
So that means you were a great bad guy.
I was a great bad guy. And
so you were a good bad guy.
I was a good bad guy.
Oxymoron there. A good bad guy.
And so word got back to the WWE, and the type of heel that I was, kind of aloof and arrogant, and you know, look down my nose at people type of deal, like a real snotty guy. And Vince saw this as the perfect character type to fit a role of a character that he had developed. It was his personal idea, this $1 million man, this guy who, by virtue of his wealth, you know, thought he was better than everybody.
So things started going well, and man, you were just at the top of your game. You won the world championship at one point, but then things began to spiral down in your personal life.
You know, when I was a kid, I had a very strong childlike faith in God, and my faith in God as a kid carried me through my father's death, my mother's drinking. Pride and ego took over in my life as I went to college on scholarship. All of a sudden, the fear was gone, the self-confidence was there, and basically by my actions, what I said to God was, thanks for getting me here, Lord, but when I need you again, I'll let you know.
Wow.
You know, I never said that, but that's what my actions, in fact, said, and I left my childlike faith. My first marriage ended in divorce after 6 years. I met my wife, Melanie, in Atlanta through our marriage. Melanie was always a very strong Christian. We began to go to church together, non-denominational church. You know, first time I left a Catholic environment, and first time I heard about relationship.
Wow.
And in the process, Marcus, I answered 2 invitations, and I walked the aisle 2 different times saying the sinner's prayer. But what I didn't do those first 2 times was I did not surrender at all.
Wow.
I recognized the reality of God. I recognized the truth of Jesus Christ being the Son of God, and that he's the only way.
So you asked for forgiveness, but you didn't make a real commitment of your life.
I did not surrender control of my life to Jesus Christ. I didn't give it all. It was basically, again, by my actions saying, Lord, I want what you have to offer as long as I can do it my way. Like so many other athletes and entertainers before me, I went to drugs and alcohol and other women. I was never addicted to the drugs or the alcohol. I certainly did my share of both. But if there was an addiction in my life, it was the ladies. And the day after WrestleMania 8, March of 1992, I called home after being out all night. And on the other end of the phone that day was a very angry wife who had discovered my infidelity.
Wow.
And I said, I don't want to talk about it on the phone. I'll be on the next plane home. She said, no, you won't. You don't live here anymore. Click.
Wow.
And the first words out of my mouth, Marcus, were, oh, God, help me.
So there was the wake-up call.
Right there was the wake-up call. I mean, in an instant, I looked in the mirror and said, you fool. You have put at risk the love and commitment of your wife and the stability and future of your children for what? You know, to stroke your ego.
Mama.
And it was the most difficult time in my life, yet as I look back at it now, probably the greatest moment of my life.
So it was the turning point.
Yes, it was.
So what did you do then, Ted?
I called a guy who's my best friend today. His name is Hal Santos. He pastors a church in Fairview Heights, Illinois, Grace Church. Well, I met Hal in a gym in Baton Rouge in 1981, about the same time that Melanie and I got married. Pastor Hal was a youth minister then, and he walked up to me in that gym, introduced himself, and simply asked me if I knew Jesus.
Wow.
He has a boldness about the Lord, for sure. And so he stayed in touch with me for 11 and a half years and prayed for me. And
you know, that is amazing, because most people would have given up a long time before the 11 and a half years.
And he was a friend to me, Marcus. He didn't beat me up when he called me.
That's great.
And he knew. And he told me later, he said, Ted, he said, I knew. And he said, I kept praying, God, whenever he hits the wall, let me be there for him. And in my darkest hour, I didn't call my pastor at home. I called the man who I had a relationship with.
Yes.
And Hal made arrangements for us to come to St. Louis. And he picked me up to go face my wife, and it's the longest 30-minute ride I ever took. And he said, Ted, Jesus said the truth would set you free. He didn't say it'd be easy or painless. He didn't say that it would come without a cost. He said it'd set you free. He said, trust God today like you did when you were a kid. When you were 15, your dad died, your mom started drinking. If you'll put that faith in God today, no matter what happens, you could lose it all.